It's a little bit bittersweet to hit the very last punctibyte of the semester, but I'm feeling pretty happy today because we had such an awesome TA dinner last night, and I'm not sure there's much better in the world than good food shared with really, really fantastic people, and especially people dressed so strikingly awesomely as you all were last night. So you were looking so sharp, and I had such a great time, and I hope that all of you did as well. We're jumping into the very last of our punctibytes, so I'm going to do my best, fingers crossed, to get to absolutely everything that we might need to help us wrap up this semester. Let's begin with scheduling and couch in that a discussion of final skills assessments and final grades and whatnot. So remember that this coming week we're going to be covering labs 24 and 25, except for that Aaron will actually finish off with the last lab, lab 26, which is our yogurt making lab. So it's kind of cool to know that we are spending the last little bit of our coverage on food microbiology, and towards those ends I've been curious and always am curious about kombucha and the microbial composition of what we call the SCOBY. The SCOBY actually stands for Sorry, just dropped my tablet. SCOBY actually stands for symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And so we know in kombucha that we find both bacteria and yeast, and there's been a lot of cultural studies in culture, right, have done on kombucha, and we know that the Acetobacter is one of the microbial bacterial composition, or one of the things that's bacterial that's contributing to that microbial composition. We also know that lactic acid bacteria are in there, but in prior studies we haven't seen much in the way of diversity of lactic acid bacteria. And so I wanted to show you this study that I'll actually go ahead and tweet this out when I'm finished here, but essentially this is a study that was the first time that it was a large-scale genotypic study looking at a more broad compositional analysis, if you will. And what they did find is that rather than Acetobacter being the primary population, it's a type of Acetobacter, but it's the Gluconacetobacter. Greater than 85% of the populations was found with that. And then also they note the lactic acid bacteria, and then they were able to go so far as to say what was the primary yeast that are found in this, and they're called Zygosaccharomyces. So again, just symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, or SCOBY. And this might actually be something fun to talk to your students about in addition to what we're saying in the food microbiology lab. So I don't know how many of you are planning on giving the yogurt lecture. You could intertwine it in that, or also just in the food microbiology lecture. And I know that some of you are planning to definitely give the lecture on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think Aaron were even planning to wrap it. So I'm really looking forward to that. That being said, I want to go back to the scheduling stuff and just talk a little bit more about what's up and coming. So besides a lot of food microbiology action, in Lab 24 we'll do the soil microbiology. We will not be able to have open lab on the 18th. So the 18th is Easter holiday. We won't have any time for students to come in during that day. That means that they're probably going to have to take advantage of Trevor and Josh's and Wheezy's last open lab that'll be on the 25th, and on that day they're still welcome to do skills assessments, but they will only have one attempt. So on the 23rd, the 24th, and the 25th, they only have one chance to complete whatever skills they haven't completed before. And I did want to talk just one more time about the sort of philosophy behind those skills tests, and I think almost everyone that I have seen assessing these has been doing an incredibly good job of this. But remember that the reason for the skills assessments in place of a practical exam is largely that it is a low-stress way for us to give them a lot of feedback and a lot of really rapid feedback and good coaching. So I like to think about these as being a means to coach your students. So on your TA jump drive, you'll notice that you do have the folder with the grading keys in it, and I know you've all found this, but just redrawing your attention to the micro lab skills rubric that you can open up there. And if you go on to the bottom tabs, you'll notice that one of them will be for the last assessment, and it's just entitled Final, and it's the one that I have opened right here, and just bringing your attention again to the fact that I've gone ahead and just given the point values for each one of these. And then, of course, competent is 90% at 4.5 out of 5, accomplished 100%, 5 out of 5, 80% for evolving, and 60% for unsatisfactory. So that's what we're looking at. Maybe I should say beginning on unsatisfactory rather than the fact that they maybe didn't, if they don't do it at all, that's obviously 0 points. So just a reminder on how to go about those skills rubrics, and the philosophy of it being like really a chance for you to do some really rapid coaching and to see them, talk to them, really help them out so that when they do leave our lab and they don't have somebody to give them feedback, they know what they're supposed to be doing. So that's a really good opportunity for us to talk with them, help them gain the skills that maybe they don't have, allow them to then return that around and come back and get assessed again. A couple of quick notes on Lab 24, and we can actually pull up the TA guidelines for Lab 24. We do not have enough nitrogen-free broth to go around to everyone, so we're going to need to have slightly bigger groups in inoculating that nitrogen-free broth. That really isn't, it is not a logistical problem because after growing that up, it's really just an enrichment step where then we'll take a loop full of that and do a nitrogen-free plate. So it doesn't matter how many people we have per nitrogen-free broth. There will be plenty, even if the whole class wanted to pass around one bottle and take a loopful out of it. All we will need in the follow-up lab is one loopful. So not so big of a deal there. Just make sure we don't run out. So maybe put a few more groups per nitrogen-free broth than we would normally do. And you can all help me remember to communicate that to the students. Also, during Lab 24, it's really easy for the students to forget that they're doing a lot of follow-up from their water microbiology lab. So they were going to need to take their PA broths with the mug and see if they can see fluorescence under the UV light. So if somebody wants to be in charge of taking them back to the UV light, we can talk amongst ourselves and decide who will be the person to do that. And hopefully, fingers crossed, they will see some fluorescence indicative of fecal coliforms. That is, E. coli has the beta-glucuronidase enzyme that converts the mug and allows it to fluoresce. So if we see or samples containing fecal coliforms, we would expect them to fluoresce. So also they're going to need to follow up with a confirmed test from their multiple tube fermentation tubes, and that'll be followed up again on Lab 25. So it's something that, it's like the gift that keeps giving as these tests roll out in their confirmed and completed tests, and then also doing the IMVIC or the MVIC to determine fecal versus non-fecal. So there's just a lot of follow-up from water. And it's very easy for the students at this time, because we're getting so close to the end, to really have trouble following up on things. And I find that one of the best ways to help that is to make sure that we push them towards summarizing their data on the board. And that's something that you'll want to do for all of the upcoming labs. Like when we finish Lab 24 and go into Lab 25, you're going to want to have a table, same thing from 23 to 24, and making sure that students really do record their data up on the board. The other thing that'll help is to remind them that we do need to have a final lab notebook check. And I know that some of you have already noted the date that is due, but if you have not yet done that, make sure you do announce to them about their final lab notebook check. One other thing is during Lab 24, they're going to be all isolating different organisms from soil. If they do have time, this is also a perfect time to look at their Winogradsky columns. So we talked a little bit about that last time. They can look at their Winogradsky columns during Lab 24, during Lab 25, or they can come back in and they can look again at them when they're doing their on the 23rd and 24th of April, or when they're doing their skills tests. That's another time they can do Winogradskys. Please don't give your students any extra credit unless they take their Winogradsky columns home with them. That's one of the things that we're really pushing them towards doing. And also make sure that if they did do it fully and they do take it home, that you do have a way to give them extra credit. One note, for those of you who do teach a Gen Micro section, if I'm not giving Lab 24 lecture and you are, I would love for you to talk just a little bit about lake hemoglobin. I usually like to offer extra credit for this idea that the nitrogenase enzyme is inactivated by oxygen gas. And so lake hemoglobin is the protein that chelates to oxygen, protecting it from the nitrogenase enzyme, keeping it from inactivating that enzyme. And so this is a cool thing to talk about, and one that either I can jump in and talk about it, or you can talk about it, so that it's something I can give them the chance to put on their final exam for extra credit. Okay, that's most everything with 24. One note on just like when you might want to have your final notebooks due, you could have them give you their final notebooks on the 21st or 22nd, and maybe then you could have them ready to give them back to them on the 23rd or 24th. That might be a good way to go about things. Let's take a note about labs 25 and 26, which is our food micro. And with lab 25, talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that is food spoilage, food pathogens, and food preservation. So I guess the good is the food preservation, the bad is the food pathogens, and the ugly is the food spoilage organisms. So can't wait for that wrap. So before beginning lab today, make sure again that you do draw the table on the board, summarize the lab 24 data, really just encouraging that active engagement to continue. We'll be taking the McConkey mug plates again back to the UV light to look for fluorescence there to try to determine whether we've got fecal coliforms. Students need to follow up on their IMVIC test. So just a lot of that water is a gift that keeps on giving. The soil microplates need to be counted. And a quick note here, this is where the final skills test assessment category is in doing a dilution problem, where they then at the end do a conversion back to the per gram amount. So this is where they will finally be encountering that last skill possibility. And if you guys would like to give them a sample problem, or alternatively, if when they get their data back from lab 24, you simply want to be available to assess their ability to do that dilution problem with their actual real results, that would be a great way to assess that skill as well. So the notes for the food micro stuff are all here, and that's pretty straightforward. Include any extras that you would like to include, but do make note that the Snyder test activity is optional. They do not have to spit in a tube, and if it grosses them out, I know for some people it's just horrible, worse than working with sewage. And so if they don't want to spit in the tube, they don't have to, but it is interesting for them to see their, based on this particular marker, how prone they are for cavities. Lots of interesting discussion that goes around that, because there's so many factors that affect your susceptibility to dental caries. So lab 26 is a lecture that I typically give about yogurt, and I'm more than willing to do those lectures for those of you whom I supervise. If you would like to do that lecture, do note that the TA guidelines are not particularly substantive, and so if you want to sit down and talk to me about certain things that you might include in that lecture, I would be more than happy to do that. It would be great. Okay, that I think covers the TA guidelines, and I want to take another quick look back at the schedule, because I want to invite all of you, and I know I did this last night too, but I want to invite all of you to come to the Gen Micro and Capstone poster presentations. Those will actually be, and I'm going to jot this down, so on your calendar it says TBA, and so the time that we will actually be doing the posters is May 9th. It's the last day of finals. A lot of you are saying that it's right after your genetics final, so May 9th from 10:15 all the way to 2:15 if you stay around for Capstone posters, though you don't need to stay that whole time. So it's just kind of going to be like the last Friday party day for micro. It's just going to be a full day's worth of really awesome posters and whatnot. And actually, along those lines, I'm going to announce this just in case some of you are bored and you want to pop over. On the 19th in the Berry Center is the ASM conference, and it's here in Laramie, and there's lots of interesting presentations and posters, microbiology related, and I'll actually be presenting on Capstone that day too. So it's a day that if you wanted, you got bored. I know most of you will be headed home for Easter events or doing something for that, but if you got bored and you wanted to hear some cool stuff over in the Berry Center, that's where that is taking place, and it's free for students. Okay, I'm going to check my list. I want to make sure I don't miss anything, because this is sort of sad, and I'm drawing it out like really badly, because this is a sad time and being the last punctibyte and whatnot. But I think we got everything Yeah, I think we really did get everything, and of course, just encouraging those skills tests to happen before we get done. Oh, I should mention final grades. I put that they're due right here on the 28th. Really, as long as you're working on them and we get them finished no later than the 29th, that would probably be totally fine. And make sure, what I mean by that is just making sure that your everything is up to date in the grade book on YO courses. From there, I can work with that. So it just needs to really be up to date there. If you're feeling industrious and you also want to download it and send me the grades, like say in the forum Aaron and Aaron that you sent me last time, that would be great. Otherwise, I will utilize your YO courses, but we need to make sure it is very much up to date, making sure that everything is out of 200 points and that your point totals are properly summing to give 200 points. Okay, great. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and thank you again for such an awesome dinner last night.